There's so much to think about when discussing the topic of legendary products, but I guess I have two sort of meta thoughts. The first thought is that life is surprisingly short, and we don't have that much time. Every day is a gift, and it's such a tragedy when people waste the gift of their time on anything less than legendary. I would also assert to you that some of you in this room believe you're on a project right now that is truly legendary, and some of you don't. If you don't, you have a decision to make. Not to decide is to decide. You either make that situation legendary or get out and find other legendary people to work with, because you don't have much time in this world. Which brings me to my second point. We talk a lot about the right approaches to building products, but I've also learned that the best products are built by people who are courageous, who, when faced with a tough decision, have the discipline and the integrity and the courage to do the right thing, even if it's hard in the short term, even if it involves doing uncomfortable things. So that's what I was going to talk about. So these guys, Logan and John from Lyft, they started out as Zimride. We're in a board meeting one day, and they say, well, we've got this new idea. You know, we think Zimride's good, but it's never going to be great. And we're just not growing fast enough. We're just not breaking through. And we want to try this experiment where we put pink mustaches on cars, and we give people cell phone, with smartphones the ability to hail these cars. And people forget at the time that UberX copied Lyft, right? There was no, I give Travis a lot of credit for being aggressive in his response, but nobody knew if normal people were going to want to drive their cars. And nobody knew, for example, if women would get in a car with a stranger that just was a random car, which is one of the reasons they did the pink mustache. The idea was to kind of make it approachable and fun and, unintimidating. So we're in the board meeting, and I'd appreciate it if we kind of keep this semi off the record. We're like, well, what's the upside? What's the downside? And they're like, the upside is we think this is going to rock people's world. And we're like, okay, that's cool. That's a good upside. And then we say, well, what's the downside? And they're like, well, we're pretty sure that it might be illegal. And I'm like, okay, well, is it illegal because we're being bad guys, or is it illegal because the laws are broken and arcane? And they're like, the latter, but I think we're going to get in some trouble. And we're like, okay, well, we'll just get the law changed then. We'll just fight to get the laws changed. And sure enough, every town that Lyft is operated in, city council usually gives them some grief to varying degrees. I remember though, it's interesting, I get a lot of interesting entrepreneurs because I guess I've kind of developed a reputation as being the person that funds crazy. I even, a couple years ago, somebody came by who said he had a plan to overthrow Cuba, which I wasn't sure how I would monetize that, but I was just interested that he thought that I was the guy you approach when that's the deal. So, a couple weeks later, we have this associate named Tommy Leap at the time, and he comes into our team meeting, and he goes, we are going to make a fortune on this Lyft deal. And I don't know how many of you, the first time you ever did one of these was a Lyft versus an UberX. It kind of doesn't matter, but like this first time that you try it, and you're just like, I'm never doing taxis again, right? It's just like the way it used to be is no longer the way it will be. Kind of rendering the features and the advantages that way. But the story of Lyft, to me, clearly they implemented the product really well. We'll get to that. But the real story of Lyft to me was one of courage, right? It was one of saying, I have this expression, the kind of entrepreneurs that we like want to bring abundance to the world with no walls. And so they have to, like I sort of reject the current vocabulary around disruption. I think disruption happens after you're successful. Logan and John didn't want to disrupt cabs. They wanted to create something great. And they knew that there would be walls, but they just chose to ignore them, right? They realized that those walls were arbitrarily created by other people. and that they themselves could contribute to the walls going down. This guy, I wish I could have funded him. I did have a chance to go to this dinner on the future of cars. I'm kind of a car buff, and so Reid Hoffman had set up this dinner with Mike Volpe, and he had the CEO of the holding group that owns Chrysler and Ferrari and Fiat and all these companies. Brilliant businessman. Then Elon was there, and I think a lot of people don't know this, but Elon spent his last dime of his PayPal riches on Tesla when he couldn't raise money. But more importantly, he also delivered a product that changes people's point of view, right? And so how many of you have done self-driving yet in the Tesla? Okay, so not so many. So I highly encourage you to try sometime. The way it works is you're just driving along, and if you're on a road where self-driving is an available capability, this little blue steering wheel pops up. And you double-click the cruise control stalk back, and it goes like boom, boom, and it starts driving itself. And the first time that happens, you're like, holy shit, right? Like, I remember one time I'm texting my partner at Floodgate, Ann Miraco, and she's like, well, how are you texting me? I thought you're driving. I'm like, the car's driving me. I'm on the Golden Gate Bridge. And, you know, like the first time I ever tried it, it like self-drove itself across the Golden Gate Bridge in rush hour traffic. And when you experience that, you're just like, this is how cars are going to be, right? Whatever you thought was cool about an Audi versus a Mercedes versus a BMW or whatever, you're like, holy crap, right? Like, this is like jumping to the next curve of awesome in terms of what this thing can do, right? These guys, probably familiar to Gib, although I don't know how much their paths crossed. These are the founders of Chegg. So we were doing Craigslist for colleges. This is my first deal and my first fund. And we were trying to do Craigslist for colleges, and we thought that classifieds were kind of the ultimate local market, and we thought that Craigslist was never going to really execute and be a big company. So we thought, hey, we'll use college as a kind of a vertical strategy. Is that dove over there? Yeah, it's pretty loud. Maybe I should fund him. He's assertive. So what happened here is Facebook decides to do classifieds. And we've got 4 months left of cash. And it's like, okay, what do we do? And we get in a room and we decide we need to shut classifieds down right now. And we had this other idea of textbook rentals that we couldn't afford to do. So we said, how much more money do we need to have 90 days of trying the textbook rental experiment? And they said another $300,000. So it's like, all right, let's go all in, Pickett's charge, right? And so, but fortunately this time Pickett's charge worked. It didn't work in Gettysburg, but it worked here. So we, obviously we didn't have a supply chain, which you need to have to do textbook rentals. So whenever somebody would rent a textbook, we'd just ship it from Amazon. And they'd get this book from Amazon and they'd say, what's the deal? I thought I'm renting a textbook from Chegg. And we're like, oh no, it's just a clerical error. Please just send it to Chegg, send it to this address. And we had this conference room that would start to fill up with these textbooks. But we felt like if we could go out in a blaze of glory and prove that students would rent textbooks, that we'd somehow find a way to raise money. But we decided that the only way we had any chance was to just go all in. All the chips on the table, all in, one hand. And then fortunately, within 15 months of us launching the prototype of Chegg, within 15 months we had our first $1 million textbook rental day in the summer, the following summer. Yeah, these guys. So this was fun. You know, it wasn't just that textbook rentals was a powerful concept, but just the way they did it was good, right? So they eventually, you know, they kind of had this slogan, don't buy it. They'd put these things in these funky blaze orange boxes. And so like when you'd be walking through the campus, the mail center, when all the Chegg textbooks came in, there'd just be orange boxes everywhere. And so they really sort of brought home the concept of the ridiculousness of the high prices of these textbooks and why somebody needed to come in with a fresh kind of voice. This is like what I think I've seen from the entrepreneurs that I've really liked to work with. I classify it into 4 things. The first is I call razor sharp positioning. The second is WTF Features. The third is Category Kings. And the fourth, most important, is courage. So I'll just take them one at a time. So razor sharp positioning. Positioning is binary. You position or get positioned. And you start out in the default looking like this guy, right? So this is what happens when you don't take control of your position. You wake up, like in the movie The Hangover, with a flame tattoo on the side of your face, pasted there by a competitor. But when you get it right, it's magic. So like people say this is true of startups clearly because you have no resources, but I think that it's also true of big companies, and it shouldn't be an excuse to be lazy. I believe that, you know, most products would benefit from thinking like Luke Skywalker in the Death Star shaft. You got one photon torpedo to fire straight down the, whatever it was, the duct, right, that blows up the Death Star. And, you know, what I find is that a lot of teams don't do the work. They think positioning is about marketing, and that's not right, right? Positioning is about what are my fundamental advantages, and who are the people in this world who value those advantages with such a high give-a-shit factor, they would be irrational not to buy from me if they knew what my advantages are. But most people don't even do the work to really know what their advantages are, much less define the sort of the customer audience segments that will go after it. So, you know, positioning is not just what you do to the product, it's what you do to the mind of the target customer. This is if you could believe it, this is actually a real supermarket with like products on the shelf. Your average customer gets bombarded by tens of thousands of marketing messages a day. You'd be surprised how little, you know, you just don't have much time to talk to them. If you get bad shelf space, you lose. If they don't know what shelf you're on, you lose. If you talk to people who don't care about your advantage, you lose. Your default position is you start out losing when it comes to positioning. And the reason for that is people don't like it when you mess with your heads. When, you know, people think the world is what it is, and now you're a startup or you're a new product or you're something they haven't tried before, and you have the nerve to come in there and tell them that they should change their point of view. Logan and John, you have the nerve to tell me that I should have some random stranger pick me up in a car? Like, this better be good. You got one shot, right? And so you get one chance, and that's if you're lucky. And when you get that one chance, if you position the product correctly, you score a direct hit. You know, you don't want to just nick the target. You don't want to come close to the target. You want to crush the target. Okay, these are and for those of you who are interested, I have like a deck of like 70 slides on all the nuances of this. But the method that I've done, and this is a little bit more B2B than B2C, but it can be adopted to B2C thinking. And I chose the B2B version because a lot of the cool examples earlier today are B2C oriented. The first thing is, what are your 3 to 5 most compelling product advantages, like for real? Who are the exact prospects who will have a super high give-a-shit factor for those advantages? Sell only what you have to those hot targets at first, wasting 0 ergs of energy on anyone else. This is where courage comes in. Make them super happy and successful. Use this as the basis to rapidly grow and scale. I'll give you an example of a kind of a scary situation I was in. You know, Steve Sinofsky said, use a really old example. You can just make up the whole story. I guess I'm doing that here. It's 20 years old now, maybe more. So I came out of Harvard Business School into this company in Austin, Texas called Tivoli Systems. And they put me in charge of somehow, Frank Moss put me in charge of their, basically the only product they had that made any money. It was this product called Tivoli Courier. And if you can believe this, back in the day, people were rolling out SAP and people were rolling out Power Builder, people were rolling out Windows 95. And very often these companies, they'd have to visit these workstations manually and put floppies in these computers because the internet wasn't a thing yet. You know, client server was a new thing. So Tivoli had this product where you could distribute software over a wide area network and not have to visit the workstations. Well, we had a couple of problems, and their names were Microsoft and CA. Microsoft decided to make a software distribution product. They called it Systems Management Server, and they decided to give it away. And the reason they gave it away was that they wanted everybody to upgrade to Windows 95 and Office 95. They didn't care about making money on systems management utilities. They cared about making money on their core product. So competing against Microsoft for free sucks, right? Especially when you're a startup nobody's heard of. So then the second problem we had was maybe even worse. It was a company called Computer Associates. And they're kind of a, oh, yeah, no worries. And they're sort of, Computer Associates is kind of a famous mainframe software company. It turns out that a lot of the shenanigans they were pulling against us, Sanjay Kumar went to jail for. But what they decided was that they needed to kill us. And they decided that the way they would kill us is to say, oh yeah, we're going to give you software distribution for free if you do an extension of your mainframe maintenance contract. So you're competing with the biggest enterprise software company of the world, and you're competing against the monopoly supplier of desktop software in the world. That was a little bit scary. So Frank goes, okay, Mike, here's the problem. We have to charge $100 per desktop and $200 per server. And we don't have a new release for another 9 months. And so you need to help us do that. And so at first I was like, man, I sure made a mistake coming to this company, right? I'm just hosed. But so what I did is I applied this positioning framework idea. I was like, okay, wait, where are we 10 times better than anything? And so developers would say stuff like, well, we're more intelligent over a wide area network. I'd say that's not an advantage. That's gobbledygook. What are you really saying? Can we distribute software faster? Yes. How much faster? 10 times faster? Yes. Okay, there's one. We can activate software on a PC desktop and a Unix server at the same time. Our competitors can't do that. Okay, that's cool. There's another one. We said no fewer than 3, no more than 5 core advantages. And so after we got that list, and we just, I just kept dogging them until we knew 10x for sure. So like, for example, if we distributed software over a WAN, we could distribute it 10 times faster. We could roll it back 10 times faster. So then the next step is, who are the customer audience segments for those advantages that would be hot targets? Well, one thing we learned is that a lot of people were rolling out SAP. A lot of people were rolling out PeopleSoft. A lot of people were rolling out Oracle Financials. And a lot of them were past deadlines. And a lot of them had spent more than $100 million. And a lot of IT people were afraid they were going to lose their job if they couldn't get this stuff to work. And so our ability to distribute software to all the nodes at once and then simultaneously turn them on was a big deal. And then our ability to distribute it faster and bring it back faster if it didn't work was a big deal. Because you couldn't afford as an IT guy to have everybody in the company saying, this is a white elephant bullshit SAP rollout that doesn't work, right? That makes IT look bad. And they'd already spent $150 million on SAP in a lot of cases. Another customer that valued our advantage was the NASDAQ. If they roll out a new version of the app, it doesn't work, they can't not have it work because like the next morning they're trading stocks, right? You affect global commerce if you don't roll back quick enough. So what we ended up doing is I said, okay, from now on we only sell Tivoli Courier when it's SAP rollouts, PeopleSoft rollouts, Oracle Financial rollouts, Power Builder to Unix server, custom app, and mission critical apps with quick cycle cutover times. We don't sell to anybody else. One guy came in and said one day, Boeing is going to give me $5 million for a Mac port. We don't sell Macs. We don't do Mac ports. Yeah, I know, but they'll give me $5 million. No, I get that, but STFU, we don't do Mac, right? What part of we don't do Mac did you not understand? I showed you our 5 profiles. That's all we do. Don't sell to anybody else because I won't take your call about any other topic. So that was a little bit of a scary 3 or 4 months because, the first quarter, everybody's like, when we make the number, they're like, oh, that's because I was a great sales guy. This Maples Harvard MBA guy is out of control, doesn't have any idea how enterprise software works, doesn't understand what it really means to be a guy in the field. But then a funny thing happened. The next quarter, we nailed the number. And then the sales guys started to get that victory psychology swagger, right? Every time one of our competitors would come up, they knew the 5 things to show in the bake-off to ridicule them. And then we just, paradoxically, by nailing our niche, we grew faster. Because it makes sense when you think about it. We were selling only to people who had a burning need for the stuff that only we could deliver. And so we just kept raising the price every quarter. And so to me, like the ultimate triumph is one day I get a call, well, Frank Moss comes in and goes, hey, we need to go up to Redmond. And I say, why is that? And he goes, well, the guy that runs SMS is kind of, he doesn't like what you're doing very much. And Steve Ballmer, you know, my dad used to work at Microsoft, he retired. Steve Ballmer would like to meet, so I think you should come up. So I'm like, okay, great. So we come up and Steve goes, look, I don't really care about Tivoli, right? I don't care how much money you make. You do whatever you want to do, but the problem is you guys are muddying up the waters. You're going in telling Schwab, roll out SAP on Tivoli, and now I want to upgrade him to Windows 95, and you refuse to sell Windows 95 upgrades. He's like, I just want to upgrade Windows 95 and Office 95. I don't give a damn how I do it, right? I don't care if it's with you, if it's with me, if it's with both of us. I don't care. And he's like, so how much money do you need to make? What are you charging? And I said, well, by then I said, well, we're charging $150 per desktop at $250 per server. And he's like, ooh la la. He's like, are you shitting me? But so anyway, we maintained that price and ended up integrating with those guys. And then a few months later, we went public. But the lesson I learned from that is that, well, we'll get, the main lesson I learned from positioning was you want to reduce your advantages to their essential core. And if you have a great product, you've got to have real advantages that move the needle. Otherwise, what are you releasing? And then the corresponding thing is to imagine an abstract list of customers where the most attractive customer in the entire world is at the top, and it goes down in rank order. And the cut line is your probabilistic forecast of the last attractive customer. And you're moving the cut line up every quarter if you're succeeding because you're getting pricing power and you're winning in the marketplace. Okay, WTF features. We talked about this already, but they change the customer's point of view about what's possible, and when implemented properly, they cause the customer to refuse to go back to the old way of doing it. This is the way I like to think of WTF features. I like to bring the 10 times positioning advantages to life as powerfully as I can. So like Elon doesn't just say, he doesn't just have some lame self-driving button, right? He's got this way that it shows up, and he's got the blue lines, and you double click the cruise control stalk, and it makes the sounds, and it's just so good, right? And it's like, so like when I was at Tivoli, by way of example, when we would be distributing something over a wide area network, we'd have these little bits looking like they were going through the network and boom, boom, activating at the endpoints. But like the idea was to surface in the UI the stuff that we were like 10 times better at. And when the customer saw the demo of that set of capabilities, they were emoted to wanting our product, right? They're just like, that's how it ought to be. That's how I want to do it. And then when our competitors would come in and demo, they'd say to Microsoft, do you have the little bits flying and activating at the same time thing in your product? No, I want that. That's what I need. That's what I'm buying here, client server. And so this is one of the things that we really encourage the entrepreneurs that we work with to do is like after they have the 10x advantages clearly known, figure out how to actualize them in the product in a way that just drives it home completely. Category kings. I'm going to go kind of fast on this. Category kings don't just make something to sell people, they create movements that change people's points of view. And the reason that category kings matter, you know, Ann and I at Floodgate have this thing we call the value stack, and it's a hierarchy of power. So at the bottom is proprietary power, then product power, then it's a company power, business model power, category power. The reason category is the most powerful part of the hierarchy is that when you get a category right, you change how people spend. So for example, Starbucks convinced people that they should spend $4 on a latte, not 50 cents on a cup of coffee. And so, you know, ultimately, the lagging indicator of success in performing the leading activities of building a category is that two things happen. One is the world sort of aligns with your point of view and helps you win. And then the other thing that happens is you cause the customer to rethink and reallocate their spend in a way that's biased to them spending a lot of money on you. The other thing that I like about category kings is they could be in a lot of different places. You know, like for example, Elvis, the category king of rock and roll. You know, Jobs, I would argue, his great success coming back to Apple is he created 3 new categories: the digital music player, the smartphone, and the tablet. Elon right now is leading with electric cars. I'm in no way comparing myself or Floodgate to these guys. You know, some of you probably remember Benioff saying no software. Elon, you know, when he talks about SpaceX, we're going to go to Mars, we're going to send people to Mars, right? Like, even though he's launching a reusable rocket this week, he runs around talking about how they're going to go to Mars. Provocative point of view is exactly that. It provokes, right? It causes people to make a choice about whether they want to enlist in your movement or whether they want to see your movement fail. This is another place I find it takes courage. There are customers out there in this world who aren't going to ever value your advantage. There's no reason to try to appease them. You'd be better off having the customers that love you think that they're bozos, right? Their polarization has its advantages in marketing and in product clarity and product market strategy. You know, points of view are often figurative. How many of you ever heard of the term thunder lizards before, just out of curiosity? So, okay, so like, how do you describe the differentiation of a VC fund? You know, so I like to say that we look for thunder lizards when they're at the atomic eggs phase. So, metaphor of thunder lizards comes from Godzilla. For those of you who don't know, Godzilla's hatched from radioactive atomic eggs, swam across the Pacific Ocean, breathed fire on buildings, swiped, you know, things and, you know, ate trains like they were sausage links. And I just thought that that's the metaphor of what we do. We spot Godzilla when he's still a radioactive egg. Like, that's the business we're in, right? And to believe in it before the rest of the world believes. Category kings usually capture 70–80% of the profit pool, if not more. So now I'll get to courage and wrap up. I think courage is the most underrated capability of legendary product teams. This is what I always ask a product team. Have you done the work to know your top 3 to 5 killer advantages? A feature is not an advantage, by the way. Being 10 times faster than anybody over a network is an example, right? Does the team have enough pride to deliver a WTF experience in those critical areas, right? Like, I have this term I call the product escape process. You know, by the end of it, we're all just want to ship so bad and just be able to make the deadlines. We're just like, God, just get it out there. We'll fix it later. Do we have a shared understanding of the definition of what makes an attractive customer? And do we have the courage to sell only to them? One of the things that's happening in Silicon Valley right now, way too much, is something that we like to call revenue chasing. It's the pursuit of cosmetic growth on the top line and saying, hey, the customer came in, they were willing to pay me, I might as well take their money. No, you might as well not take their money, because 2 things. One is they're probably going to churn someday, much likelier than you think. They're probably going to take longer to close than you think. But even worse is the confusion it injects in your strategy, right? Like, what we understood at Tivoli was the reason I had to say no to Windows 95 upgrades was not that we couldn't upgrade Windows 95. Our product could do it. It's I didn't want to confuse our developers, right? We had to get client-server apps nailed, right? We had to have customers say that we were just unambiguously a stair-step function superior to our competitors in that area. But like saying no to the unattractive customer who will pay you now is really hard. And you know, you get pressure from sales, you get pressure from other people in the product team, you forget what you believed in the first place about that. So I'll take courage and discipline over talent any day of the week. And like Jeff Smith of Smule is one of my favorite CEOs to work with. He says, you know, winners have the courage to focus, losers hedge because they're afraid. I've got some, like I said, I've got some backup stuff here. If you're interested, I could send you the more in-depth, okay, these are the exact 10 steps in a row to take diagnostically to nail positioning. This is a really good book on category design. I don't know how many of you have heard of it, Play Bigger. I think it's one of the more important recent books out on entrepreneurship. But the main, I guess the main final thought is, you know, you think about Silicon Valley and the products that have really made an impact. And I don't know about you, back when I had a real job and I worked on product teams and did product marketing and stuff, was an executive, I wanted to be associated with products that had respect in my markets. You know, you think about, let's say that you're one of the chief designers of the Tesla. Or let's say you're, you know, one of the chief designers of Facebook in the early days. You know, nobody can take that away from you, that you did that you were part of, you know, just a legendary product outcome, that you weren't just, you know, in the words of a former politician, you weren't just marking time, you made a difference. And what I find is, you know, in the quest to get the next release out, whenever I've spun my wheels in life, whether it was working with startups as a VC or whether it was being a product guy myself, it was when I forgot that if I'm not on a path to legendary right now, I have to do something different today. And so I guess that would be my last thought would be to dare to involve yourself in legendary things always, because time is short, it'll go faster than you think. And you know, if you get involved with those kind of projects throughout your career, you'll look back on it someday and get to enjoy it twice. Yeah, so that's all I have to say, unless there's any questions or if anybody wants to call BS on anything.